Hello, with me today I have Tom Like, a technology equity analyst at Singer. Hi Tom, thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure.
Clearly AI is going to make some companies very rich. We've already seen that with the gaming chips firm Nvidia as perhaps the most high profile example of the anticipated boom in being priced in already. So what do you think about Nvidia's share price performance and that of others caught up in the AI hype?
Yeah, so I mean, Nvidia is the classic picks and shovel play for AI. I mean, their GPUs are the ones that are powering the sort of the training part of the AI. Whether 30 times sales is the correct multiple is for the market to decide, but clearly there's a lot of hope priced in. I think that the rally, as we look at the market, especially in the US, Nasdaq in H1 has had its best historic H1 ever. Just yesterday or a couple of days ago, we had the special rebalance. First time since 2011 where 6 names in the Nasdaq were now more than half of the index. In the modern theory of diversified portfolio, is that even should that be allowed or is that sensible? They've stepped in and there's been a special rebalancing. The likes of Nvidia and Apple and Microsoft and Alphabet have had their weightings cut because of how contrary that rally has been. Clearly, other names will benefit, but it might be slightly more indirect than the Nvidias or the TSMCs or the EDA guys like Cadence and Synopsys, who are obvious picks and shovels plays on AI.
You've mentioned a lot of the big American names, and that's obviously the place we look to typically for tech on that scale. But what about the UK? Are there companies here that will benefit significantly from this theme?
I think a quick filter of the UK market, some topical names like Darktrace in cybersecurity, people know them from the McLaren F1 sponsorship. Seeing machines in automotive, that's been a big trend in the States. Seeing machines is obviously geared into driver monitoring systems. I think 3 companies to flag that are not obvious beneficiaries, but that sort of is AI friend or foe, sort of using it to enhance business models. Semiconductors, we've mentioned, obviously it's an obvious name. The UK has historically punched above its weight. The likes of ARM have come out of here. People like Alphawave, who are at the bleeding edge of 3 nanometer, geared into the likes of TSMC and Samsung. They are clearly, at the very cutting edge of what AI can do. In terms of, the smaller cap names, we had 2 IPOs last year, Insilica and Sondrel. These are ASIC companies, so application-specific integrated circuit companies. That, if we go back to the sort of the Ocado and the Amazon examples I gave, the way that people typically think about AI is it's very much, in that sort of cloud server, the sort of central nodes powering what goes on the edge, but actually the digitization of what's happening on the edge, and so turning these devices smart, that often requires an application-specific chip. You wouldn't go for your bog standard CPU or GPU, and so someone like an Insilica, they're geared into automation and automotive. The things like Amazon I mentioned, the robotics powering that arm. Clearly, there's an Nvidia GPU at the center powering it, but actually, what is telling that arm to move left, move right, pick that, don't pick that? That's where ASICs would definitely come in, and we've got exposure in the UK. Other ones would be things like Big Technologies Group. That's a sort of hardware software play. For those who aren't familiar, they are geared into criminal justice markets. It's offender monitoring, so it's the classic ankle tag. And you might say, well, how does that have anything to do with AI? It's a market that's been around for 30 odd years. The size of an ankle tag is very well defined. You can't put more processing power through there. You have to think quite innovatively about how you can be smart with the tag to prolong things like battery life. They've mentioned things to do with AI and different algorithms they're working with about how to prolong that. But on the software side, part of the problems of AI is this surveillance state that we're all fearful of. But if it's using the correct ways, and so Big Technologies works with a lot of jurisdictions around the world. If you've got someone on an ankle tag, and they've just been released for armed burglary, for example, police departments will have all that data. Is that person integrating to society? Are they going to work, going home, sitting on the sofa, maybe going to the gym, or are they quite sporadic? All of a sudden, out of nowhere, for the first time ever, they're sort of going around a house 4 times at night at different hours of the day. Maybe at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Are they casing the joint? Could we have preventative policing come in all of a sudden? So these are different sort of issues that people are grappling with, but actually for, criminal justice departments, but also for businesses, very powerful insights. And finally, the last one I'd flag is Echo, which is another small cap company in the UK. They do contact center software, so sort of, call centers. And this is a great example because all consumers will be familiar with it. So, you call up British Airways and you're told your call is being recorded for training and monitoring purposes. What actually is the business doing with this call recording? They released a module recently that's cloud-based call recording using AI. And so if you're British Airways, if Tom like calls up and wants to go to, I don't know, go to Greece on holiday, the AI can listen to my answers, use the pool of data of all people with my similar job titles, locations, or sort of interests, and it can feed in real time to the person operating the call what is the most optimum answer to get the required outcome. And so that's how consumers, in the background, AI will now be creeping into everyday lives, giving us a more personalized service, perhaps better outcome for us or the business, yet to be known. But it's sort of that Netflix effect of more personal content being delivered. So those are three names that, while not necessarily the GPUs of Nvidia and the TSMCs, but companies that are sort of using AI as a friend rather than foe and enhancing their business models.
So not everything's going to be, not everything AI will be a success. I mean, are you concerned, or do you see a scenario similar to the .com boom and bust, where back then companies just mentioned internet in their updates or to the general public, and the shares went sharply high? I mean, do you see anything, you new existing companies jumping on the bandwagon, or we all know what happened in the .com boom?
Yeah, of course. I mean, and Amazon, which obviously was a poster child for the .com boom, eventually it was proved right, but it was painful and a long time in the making. But there was an article I think it was back in mid-June. There was a French AI company, I believe it was called Mistral AI, and they raised 105 million euros after founding only 4 weeks earlier. Now, whether the people backing that, whether it had the track record of the business model is yet to be seen, but there's sort of bubbles emerging within AI where hot money can flow into, and that might be proven right. Or we might get a pets.com or the .com boom where, you just mentioned the buzzword bingo and funding flows in. But I think it's all about how companies use AI. It's, if it is that next industrial revolution of augmenting and enhancing business models, everyone got very excited by Zoom during COVID. Was that a moment in time, or was that a sustainable business model? If AI is accelerating what is already a quite sustainable business model, like an Nvidia, then fantastic. If it's a flash in the pan, a moment in time like Zoom in COVID, then I'd be more skeptical.
To help investors out, do you have any tips on how to assess companies' AI credentials and decide whether or not it makes them more investable?
It's a difficult one because it's so subjective. We spoke about ChatGPT and homework was the classic example. So Chegg shares over in the States shared 60%, in virtually a week over the back of these fears. And that was a very obvious, replacement of what previously humans had done, that, AIs that can succinctly wrap up a sort of, what a human could do, but in a human format. That was an obvious, replacement of what humans can do. On the subjective, it's very difficult. So I think, when we talk about machine learning, which is part of that AI umbrella, there's a thing called human in the loop. And so that's a concept where even if we trust the algorithms and the AI to, run the data and spit out whatever they want to, formulate, there always has to be that human element checking what is happening. And so I think you have to be mindful of how important is that human in the loop. In the case of homework, perhaps if the AI hallucinates, so it gives a fictitious response and disguises it as factual, that's a problem. And so there has to be a human element there, a teacher checking it. Whether it's, the eGates example or different examples of surveillance, if the human has to be there for regulatory purposes or quality purposes, so for example, in journalism or generative AI making up, they bring out the next bestseller called Larry Trotter. Clearly the lawyers at at Harry Potter will be quite concerned by that, and not having that human in the loop, actually saying, okay, it's a great response, but it's clearly based off the computers, the algorithm has taken one of the best-selling novels of all time. There has to be some sort of stopgap there. And so that's why I think it's important to always remember whether there's a human element that can be replaced or can't be replaced. And that's sort of how I think about assessing whether AI will replace a business model. But it comes down to, is it sustainable or is it Zoom during COVID? What the sort of multi-year outlook is on that.
Tom Like, technology analyst at Singer, thanks ever so much for joining me today.
Pleasure.